What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome into the LA Football Show here live on the LA Football Network. I'm your host, Ryan Dyrud. You can find me on Twitter at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB, main account, LAFB Network, LAFBnetwork.com, LAFB Network on YouTube, LAFB Network anywhere you're looking for LA football content. Coming at you live, a little late, usually 5 o'clock. Sorry, running a little bit behind. Just, normal stuff, normal day, working from home. So, had to get it all in because we got a huge show. Unfortunately, not with a bunch of positives. I was so pumped all week for this weekend. Rams, Niners, Chargers, Raiders. Huge implications for both teams. Rams, playing for that 2 seed, finally getting that monkey off their back of beating this hated rival Niners, the McVay-Shanahan rivalry. They come up short. Chargers, play, win, you're in. They can't get it done. Somber day in Los Angeles. But not all is lost. The Rams did win the division. I know it's a hollow award, but they did that. They're in the playoffs still. They're playing a reeling Arizona team who has, I think lost 5 of their last, or 4 of the last 5. They're 1-4 in their last 5 games. I know that they beat the Rams in the beginning of the season, but the Rams stomped them on Monday Night Football last time they played. So, I mean, if anything, I think it's a good matchup. Now, we're going to get all into it, but just from the top here, I know the Rams, had they won, they would have played a depleted Saints team with most likely a Trevor Siemian at quarterback. And now you still have a Cardinals team who is not playing great, but, they still have Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. There's the potential allure of J.J. Watt maybe coming back. So we'll get into that throughout the week because that's for that. Now it's Monday. Day after this, we got to look at a lot of things here. We're going to look at tackling issues. We're going to look at play calling. I mean, we might even talk a little fan attendance. I know that's been a contentious topic right now. For those of you hanging out with me, drop any questions in the comments. Would love to get to those. Hopefully be able to answer that, and we can kind of just work through this LA football therapy session together. Later on in the show, my man Dan Wolkenstein, host of Chargers Unleashed, is going to join me to go through the Chargers game, as there is a ton to unwrap there and get into. So basically probably top of the hour, 6 o'clock, is when we'll get into Chargers talk. For now, we'll start with Rams. And hey, we got a little bit, we'll probably end the show. I mean, there's been news with USC and UCLA. Some big news there with the transfer portal, with commitments, with players coming back, with coaching finalizations. So we'll end the show with a little bit of, some USC and UCLA updates. LA football is never boring, at least. There's always something going on. So you have to bear with me. I'm getting at the end of this cold, but still got my tea. When I'm talking alone a lot, the pipes get a little rusty. So we got to keep them liquidated, So, yeah. Comment in here. Raiders going to the playoffs. Let me put this on the screen before we get rolling here. Raiders going to the playoffs with an interim coach, and the Chargers out with a defensive coaching guru. Say what for later? Yeah, I'll get into that later. We break all that down. But, I know it doesn't look good. I think our conversation hopefully will be enlightening a little bit. I think, and this is from, I'm not sitting up here in some ivory tower like I know all, but I've talked to a lot of former players. Good friend of mine, Frosty Rucker, who I'm going to talk about here on this Rams portion too, because I had a conversation with him. You get a lot of insight when you talk to players, because I think we can all sit here, and a lot of media, they have access, but I don't think they have the conversations, and they have it in like a media player access. And, I been blessed and fortunate to go kind of behind the scenes and just like sit in the living room with some of these guys, sit at a bar with drinks and like hear stories and get into it. And I think the NFL coaching perception among fans and media alike, and especially on Twitter, is very different than reality. Obviously, coaches are extremely important. But I think what falls on their shoulders is very different than I think what we all think. and they put together game plans. They're about preparation, keeping players focused, making some adjustments to give their players success. But so much more is on execution and players being professionals. And, coaches are responsible for holding those players accountable, playing the right players. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. So I'm not really answering your question, just kind of building that up. We'll get into it more, like I said, later. But I think you try to pose it as an interim coach versus a defensive guru, and the guru didn't, totally be a guru, if you will. But yeah, it's different than that. But we'll get all into it. So stick around, please. Hope you do. Tyler, my man, what's going on, brother? Tyler writes for the LA Football Network. Definitely hard to celebrate winning the West after that loss. So many things went against the Rams, and it's hard to accept a loss for Fuller. I hadn't mentioned yet, just came out that Jordan Fuller will potentially need ankle surgery, and he's out for the season. Huge loss for this Rams team heading into the playoffs. He wears the green dot, so I know Ramsey took over that role in that game. We'll see if it sticks with that or if it goes to one of the backers. Ernest Jones has done it in the past, but he's also injured. So that's a big question. But yeah, Jordan Fuller is so important. Nick Scott got a little banged up. So we finally saw a little bit of Terrell Burgess, which we've all been wanting to see anyway. So this is, I think, his time. He'll finally get on the field and we'll be able to see if what we've been saying is right or if coaches know something we don't. We'll see. So, but let's talk about this game. Rams-Niners. Both these games were fantastic, just entertaining games. Came out on the wrong end for LA, and the LA Rams game both games were very up and down, just kind of opposite. Rams started off so hot, jumping out to a 17-0 lead. And then, the Niners scored 17 unanswered. And it was the tale of almost two halves, but then the Rams didn't fold. They come back, take the lead, and then Demise with 2 minutes left, minute and a half left, and let a quarterback like Jimmy Garoppolo drive down the field and score. Just, it's hard to put words because this was one of the best first halves I've seen this team play, not just against the Niners, but in general. I mean, they were doing everything right in that first half. I did a little jump on here live, kind of just recap of the first half, what to look for in the second half. And it was like, man, defense looked fantastic. Offense was moving the ball great. Special teams was working. Like if there was anything we were going to really nitpick on, it was that 3rd and 1 call going empty and then, giving the ball back and allowing a less than a minute long drive for the Niners to go down and get 3 points. But it was like, okay, let's see how they come out in the second half. Apparently that had bigger repercussions than we could have expected. So there's a few things I want to get into with this. A few things about why this could have happened. And again, throw me some thoughts, throw me some questions if you have. We'll try to answer them to the best. So, coming out of that second half or coming out of halftime into the second half, you have a 17-3 lead. Niners get the ball first. And you want to, as a defense, not only continue what you did in that first half, but you need to now come out of the half and make a statement about how you are going to control the rest of the game. Because so often, beginning of games is all about the opening script. Typically, the upper hand goes to the offense, especially with this type of defensive scheme, this Vic Fangio original scheme that was then passed to Brandon Staley and now has gone down to Raheem Morris. This is the original Fangio scheme. Predicates a lot on adjustments and kind of reaction and then becoming offensive in a sense. But a lot of that, you have to see what the offense is giving you and adjust. If you remember last year, almost every game, I'm not saying ended in points, but for the beginning of the game, most offenses moved the ball very well against the Rams defense. And then they clamped down in the second half and really became a solid defense. This year has been very up and down. I think we've seen that more than fans want to give credit for, where later in games is where the defense, against Baltimore, they really shut down. Against the Vikings, they really shut down. So I know, and we'll get into Raheem Morris here in a second, but overall, this defensive unit has progressed and has done well at adjustments. But you'd hope at the beginning of the half is they'd come out of the half with those adjustments in mind and then be able to really clamp down on the offense like they already had. Now, Shanahan, I've been pretty hard on Shanahan. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a great offensive coach, phenomenal offensive coach, a good head coach. I don't know why he's deemed great. But he has been very good at offensive adjustments, and specifically against the Rams. Has been very good. Was against Staley. Like, let's not let him off the hook. Was against Wade Phillips. He's always been good at adjusting against this Rams team. And yesterday was no different. Comes out, and they just absolutely put on a clinic in that third quarter. Now, part of it, or I'll say very little of it, is scheme. Very little of his scheme. I mean, I know people right now are absolutely, and yeah, I see this comment, Renee. Not sure if you're in the same D as Staley. It's pretty similar. It's a very similar set. So, using players a little differently, but if you remember, Jalen Ramsey was introduced last year into this like star position. This was like this new concept for Jalen Ramsey and for this defense, and that's what he's been largely his role this year. The biggest thing for me, which again I'll get into more later, is that the players that left last year. You lose 4 quality starters, 4 quality tackling starters. But anyway, so scheme a little bit. I mean, obviously there's going to be some bit of playing a role. But so much was I mean, they just ran the ball down their throats when they came out of the half. Gashing plays. I mean, Elijah Mitchell was just gashing him. Big holes, breaking tackles. And so schematically, there's things you can do differently to put players, a little different. But when you're a defensive player and they're running the ball, sometimes you got to be hat in a hat, make a play, beat the guy in front of you. And they were just getting moved at will. They weren't wrapping up. They weren't fully tackling. And so I know the frustration is on Raheem Morris. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve any of it. Not saying at all that, but a lot of it is in this instance, players need to make plays, make tackles. And I think there was 18 missed tackles, I believe I saw. That was, according to the Pro Football Focus, 18 missed tackles. Elijah Mitchell was responsible for like 9 of them. I mean, that's all execution. I was talking with someone on Twitter, and I don't want to. I'm not at all trying to put them on blast by any means, so I won't drop their name. But they were talking about how that's coaching. It's not. At this level, the NFL level, it is not on coaching to coach tackling. You should be able and know how to tackle in the professional National Football League. Coaches obviously can instill certain things. You go over fundamentals in the offseason. You can discipline guys. You can. I saw some people saying, well, you got to, make a statement on the sideline, like sit guys out plays. Well, when half your defense isn't tackling, you can't sit out half the defense. So I talked to Frosty about this because, again, we can all sit here and point fingers and talk about what we think we know, but Frosty Rucker played in the league for 13 seasons, played for 4 different NFL organizations, won 2 national championships at USC. So I asked him, I'm like, hey, what at this point, week 18, this tackling, 18 missed tackles, is this a coaching issue? Like, what is going on here? Are they not instilling guys? Are they not practicing right? He said, I can read the text if you want, but he said, no, this is 100% on the players. This point in the season, they know what's on the line. They know what they need to do. And the veteran player leadership is the one that calls that out and steps up. Not the coaches. So again, I'm not sitting here putting zero blame on coaching, but I'm just saying at this point in the season, a lack of tackling or a lack of being in the wrong spot or not being gap sound. That's either a systematic issue or it's just a execution issue that consistently yesterday was not well. So it's unfortunate. Luckily, I think it doesn't happen very often to this Rams team overall. I mean, this is a 12-win team, guys. Let's not forget that. Just something about the Niners. 2 of their 5 losses are against these Niners this year. It sucks. It shouldn't be that way. I'm not making excuses that, oh, well, like, whatever, move on. It's just one of those teams that they just, for whatever reason, have not been able to beat. And I want to address this. Renee, if I can put this up here. If I'm McVay, it may be cold, but I'd fire Morris and hire the professor himself, Vic Fangio, now that he's available. Got to strike when opportunity presents itself. Can't control timing. I've seen that sentiment a ton. Here's the thing. Vic Fangio is arguably one of the greatest defensive minds out there. So I'm not saying that would be a bad thing or that's a detriment or that they necessarily shouldn't do that. Love Vic Fangio. I mean, you saw the Denver defense this year had a ton of injuries and still finished pretty well. But I don't know how many of you out there actually watched the Broncos play. But the defense, schematically is the same as this Rams defense. Hence why Von Miller, they traded him there. It was kind of the Broncos, sending him to a winning team. B, it was a trade that they could get, like, he fits in. And also they got, if you remember, they got the linebacker as well, Kenny Young, because he fits. It's like the system's the same. So I don't think anyone, if you're out there thinking that Vic Fangio is going to come in and all of a sudden this defense is going to be the 85 Bears, it's not. It's very similar to what you're seeing. And if you watch the Broncos this year, there were some games where they were absolutely dominant and some games where they gave up big plays. They couldn't stop anyone. They gave up. Look at the Philadelphia game. They got smoked by Philly's offense and could not stop the run worth anything. And I know that's what so many Rams fans get so upset about is the bend don't break. That is the Fangio defense. And then as the game goes on, your star players get better and better, clamp down and play better. Against the Niners, that didn't happen. The star players not get better. Jordan Fuller goes out. That's a huge loss. Aaron Donald was never really dominant yesterday. Von Miller made some good plays, but wasn't dominant. Jalen Ramsey overall, I think, had a fairly good game, but also had he undercut a pass that he missed for that big game to Deebo Samuel. You watch Fangio's defense, secondary, Bryce Callahan, all those secondary guys, they got burned every now and then. Statistically, they look good, just like the Rams do. Look up the Rams stats. They're a top 5 defense. PFF has them rated the number 1 defense in the NFL. So all I'm trying to say to you, everyone, is that Vic Fangio coming in, again, fantastic. I would not be against it. But it's not going to look a lot different than what it is now. What Raheem Morris is doing is essentially running Vic Fangio's system with some other wrinkles. So you're not going from like Wade Phillips to Vic Fangio, which are 3-4, but they're very kind of, they run differently. You're going to see a lot of the same. And I'm just sitting here telling you, I don't have sources, so I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I'll absolutely own it. But the only way I see the Rams having an opening at defensive coordinator is if Raheem Morris gets hired as a head coach. I do not see a world, unless they go to the playoffs and just get smoked, where Raheem Morris gets fired. In NFL circles, he is highly regarded as a defensive mind. The Rams defense is top 5 in almost every category. He's highly regarded as a defensive coordinator among media circles. So I'm just being honest that I do not see that happen. And I know there's frustration with Raheem Morris. I think it's unwarranted personally. I'm not a Raheem Morris stan, but I just don't see it. So let me get to some of these questions here. Julio. Here we go. Has McVay ever done a quick rhythm passing game? I think that's a good question because when you looked at yesterday, what was frustrating offensively was that the running game was non-existent. I think Sean, for once, didn't really abandon it, which was refreshing, but they just could never get anything going. I mean, Sony Michel finished, with a 2-yard average. He had 21 carries, so they didn't abandon the run. Cam Akers had 5. They rushed the ball almost 30 times, but finished with like under 50 yards rushing. But when they passed, it's like all these route concepts were just long developing, and the offensive line, who did not have one of their stellar games yesterday, that's for sure. I mean, Austin Corbett, finished with a 13 pass block grade. Brian Allen finished with a 39 pass block grade. David Edwards, 41 pass grade. So the offensive line was not pass blocking, and the McVay was running these long developing route concepts. And so has McVay ever done? Yeah, they've done quick passes. I mean, with Bobby Trees and Cooper Kupp in the past, it did a ton. I mean, remember how big the screen game? I used to joke, find someone that loves you as much as Sean McVay loves a screen. We haven't seen a screen. Shockingly, it's like very odd how this offensive identity of Sean McVay went from play action, 11 personnel, quick developing stuff, quick throws, to now let's just air it out with Matthew Stafford. I think that's been the frustration, is that they've kind of changed their offensive identity in a bit, and not saying they can't get back to it or they won't, but in a game like yesterday, and this is where McVay deserves criticism and where he still has not adjusted to. And I've talked a lot about sticking to the run, and what I haven't talked enough about, and I apologize for that, because thank you for bringing up this point, Julio. What needs to be said is you can do short yardage stuff that isn't necessarily running the football. So the long 3-5-step dropbacks that take 3.5 to 4 seconds to really develop clearly wasn't working yesterday after that first half. It was in the first half. Clearly in the second half, it wasn't. Give them credit. When they needed it, they got it done on that drive to take the lead. But it's like, okay, the running game isn't working. We don't have time because Nick Bosa and Eric Armstead are just destroying our offensive line. So why are we not running more screens, quick slants, out routes? I mean, the Patriots run the 2-yard out route more than any team in the NFL. And that's what made Tom Brady for the first decade of his career. So why they weren't doing that, I don't know. And that, I think, needs to be addressed. And that is something that I think it's fine if Sean and Matt and Kevin O'Connell, and they want to do these deeper routes to, really utilize stretching the field, having this big arm quarterback, but they have to be able to realize when it's not working, we need to go to the short area stuff and get the ball out quick. And you mentioned the offensive line built for play action, not for drop back. I would agree. I mean, I think it's a very good offensive line, but no offensive line is built to block for 5+ seconds, 4+, even 3. I mean, if you look at the most quarterbacks are getting the ball out of their hands in 2 seconds. It's usually snap, 1, 2, balls out. And then if you are able to establish the run and utilize play action, then you can get those long 3 to 5 second deep ball opportunities. So that's something that's going to be, interesting to see if they're able to do that in the playoffs, if it comes down to where they're getting stopped like that, if that's something that they will get back to. So, and that being said, I want to quickly talk about the end of the game, and then I'll get to a few more of these questions. We'll jump back to defense, which is fine. It's a good topic. End of the game. So Rams score, take the 7-point lead. They stop San Francisco. Defense does their job at that point. Get the ball back. There's what? I think a 2-minute warning or so, just around there. And then it's, okay, essentially get a first down, the game's over. We're pretty damn close. They run it twice, as they should. Force San Francisco to use 2 timeouts. And then there was what? You guys probably know better than me. A minute 39 or so left at that point, with 3rd down and I think 7. So then you come to the dilemma, and you say, okay, run the football, probably not getting the first down, but we forced them to use their final timeout. Throw the football, have the potential to get the first down in the game, but if it's incomplete, you know, they save their timeout, which can be critical in that second drive. So I get the sentiment of running it, but I think in this day and age, and I think this is what most Rams fans thought, and I agree, and it's all, you know, hindsight 2020. If they would have randomly ran it for, I mean, we'll get to the Raider games here soon. Raiders, in those critical moments, ran the ball for 12 yards. So, but with this offense, when you trade 2 first-round picks for Matthew Stafford, when you have Cooper Kupp, who is the best receiver in the game, I think you have to take the shot to end the game there. Right? Have to. And analytically speaking, I don't even know what the analytics are of it, to be honest, but just looking from a old football hat, yeah, run the football, force them to do a timeout. I get it. But with Sean McVay's quote-unquote genius offensive mind, this is where you need to throw the football and potentially end the game. And yeah, Ben, exactly what I was saying. 3rd down is why you traded for Matthew Stafford. That's 3rd down play is why you wanted him here. But I think you could do this too. Here's what, and again, we're sitting here 24 hours after the game talking about it. So in that moment, you know, and you think still no timeouts, minute and a half, Jimmy Garoppolo, 90 yards. Yeah, it's fine. Defense has played relatively well most of the game. Aaron Donald, Von Miller. And if they would have stopped him, we wouldn't even be talking about that play. But I still think, and this is what you can do, because everyone automatically assumes, myself included, I've talked about it before. If the pass goes wrong, it's incomplete, stops the clock. But why not do, like, why would you not do one of these short out routes? I mean, look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's use them for an example. They are absolutely, again, this is 3rd and 7, not 3rd and 3, so it's a little different scenario, but they are absolutely automatic on those 3rd and shorts because they literally run a guy in motion, Tyreek Hill. I know we don't have anyone like Tyreek Hill, but we have Cooper Kupp. He's not as fast, but he's automatic still. So Tyreek Hill running across, whether it's in motion, and then as soon as he snaps the ball, he leaks out and they just give it to him immediately, or he runs a slant, a 2-yard slant all the way across the linebackers. They run that play. It's a 2-yard pass play. 2-yard pass play that 3rd and short is automatic. Now, 3rd and 7, that would not be automatic, but here's what I would say. You run a play like that, A, you have no risk of an incompletion stopping the clock, but B, that still gives you a better shot than a HB dive up the gut when they're stacking the box. So that, I think, is what we want to see progression and what we want to see Sean McVay's play calling. Even a screen. I know people are mixed on screens. I just talked about it a little bit. But a screen, it's pretty much a guaranteed non-incompletion. So we alleviate the stop clocking issue, but you still give yourself a better shot than a 7-yard run. So I like that. I think that like a 7-yard out, 10-yard out, those are where it's riskier. Because then if you drop back incompletion, save that timeout, all of a sudden it comes down to them. They move the ball down. They're able to use that timeout. Then we're talking about that. Man, if they didn't have that timeout, they're up against the clock. So, I mean, it's all hypothetical. But I think those plays, those quick out routes, give you a better opportunity, and you still have the deviation of very little risk. So that's what I would have liked to see. So let's get back to a couple of these questions before we wrap up our Rams talk. And again, we'll talk all week about this playoff matchup. So let's see here. Forgive me, scanning through these. Renee going back to Vic Fangio. One man can make a huge difference in the same scheme. Look at the difference between Staley last year and Morris this year. A great mind makes a bigger impact than an okay mind, and Fangio is a great mind. Yeah, certainly could. I think we're in disagreement here, which is totally fine. I just think there's a revisionist history, and this defense schematically and defensive mind-wise is not way worse this year than what it was last year. Staley. I would still think Staley's a better mind than Raheem Morris, in my opinion. But to me, the bigger issue is personnel. You lose Michael Brockers, you lose Troy Hill, you lose John Johnson, you lose Morgan Fox. Those are very important pieces from last year's team. I mean, you're going from Jordan Fuller and John Johnson in the back end to Jordan Fuller and Taylor Rapp. And Taylor Rapp has obviously struggled this year. I think that's well documented. The defensive line has not been as good without Morgan Fox in rotation and Michael Brockers. Michael Brockers wasn't a pass rushing threat, but against the run, he was very important. Now, A'Shawn Robinson and Gray Gaines have stepped up big this year, but imagine having those with a Michael Brockers. That alone makes your defense better. Troy Hill was one of the best slot defenders in the league last year. One of the best. You go from him to what? David Long Jr. this year, who has obviously struggled. So I get the disdain that many have, but you got to look at personnel too. Vic Fangio has a ton of it. And again, I would love Vic Fangio on this team. So I'm just basically building the case of why Raheem is not as bad as people think. Vic Fangio dealt with a lot of injuries on the Broncos this year. A lot, at linebacker specifically. But you still look at that defensive roster week in and week out, and you have some of the best D tackles, no Aaron Donald, but outside of Aaron Donald, Draymond Jones, Shelby Harris are better than who the Rams have. One of the best safety tandems in the game, Justin Simmons and Kareem Jackson. You have Bryce Callahan, Kyle Fuller, Ronald Darby, and Rookie of the Year candidate in Patrick Surtain Jr. as your corners. So I'm just saying personnel is very important too. So let's not sit here and act like that this secondary outside of Jalen Ramsey is like some elite secondary. Darius Williams has regressed a bit this year in the same scheme. This wasn't a change in scheme. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I think Vic is great. I just think we have to look more at other things about why there could be an issue. And it's not simply just the coaching change. It's the personnel changes. Julio, stupid question. Never a stupid question, my man. But do the Rams fit better as a 4-3? You know, nowadays it's so rare to run in base. Even 4-3-3-4. Most D coordinators are running nickel, dime so much often, and that switches up that front base look so often. But no, I mean, they've ran a 3-4 for the last, Wade Phillips was a 3-4, Brandon Staley was a 3-4. They're still running a 3-4 this year. So they've been a 3-4 since McVay's been here. So I don't know necessarily they fit better as a 4-3. Again, that really only changes your edge package, whether they're standing up or hand in the dirt. And again, it doesn't even, look at the Chargers. Chargers were 4-3 last year. They're 3-4 this year. And you still you look at it like visually, it looks very similar anyway. So I don't think that has a big deal. I think that's overused anyway nowadays by media and fans and people on Twitter and content creators. I don't think many players and coaches even decipher much 3-4 versus 4-3 because you're running so much out of base. Okay. Sorry, let's get through these. Ben, what's up, brother? Welcome to the show. I think McVay has a little PTSD from Woods' injury. He doesn't call any jet sweeps anymore, and those sweeps may have slowed down the Niners' D-line. I agree. I don't know why. We used to see 3, 4, 5 jet sweeps a game, and it wasn't even always Woods. He'd switch with Woods, throw some to Van Jefferson, not throw, but throw in Van Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, and the jet sweeps and the screens just have disappeared. The only screens we see are tight end screens of Tyler Higbee, and I really don't know why. It's interesting because I just said it earlier, but I used to say all the time, find someone that loves you as much as Sean McVay loves the screen because of how much they ran that damn screen, and now they never run it anymore. So, yeah, I don't really know. But let's see here. I think we're getting kind of oh, you guys had a lot while I was trying to catch up. But okay, here we go. Renee, I seriously appreciate all the questions and engagement here. That's what makes this fun. So, easily counterpoint your personnel argument. One could argue the Rams are better this year personnel wise. Okay, I'd like to see where. I'm assuming you're just talking defensively, obviously. So, outside of adding Von Miller, I don't know where personnel wise they would be considered better this year. And Von Miller, joined half the year and was hurt when he first got here, missed his first game here, and then had to kind of get worked in slowly. And I love Von Miller, and he's great and obviously had some good games. But outside of him, I mean, where else would you argue that they're better personnel? And maybe you're right, but secondary wise, they haven't really found a fix for losing Troy Hill. I don't think David Long Jr. is the answer there. On the back end, we talk all the time, would love to see Terrell Burgess more, but they are playing Taylor Rapp more, who last year was, I think, a great rotational piece when Fuller and John Johnson were the starters. Hasn't been great as the true starter. So don't see where you're better there. Defensive line, I mean, you haven't added anyone. You lost Brockers and Fox. Ashawn Robinson was on the roster last year. He was hurt, albeit. Sebastian Joseph-Day, who's been hurt this year. Greg Gaines was on the roster last year. He's played great this year in his stead. But there was no additions. I mean, Bobby Jones, you drafted, hasn't played at all. And yeah, I mean, at linebacker, Kenny Young trade, I think, was still kind of baffling. I don't really understand that. I think he was one of the better tacklers on this team, which was an issue yesterday. Ernest Jones, I think, has been, solid since coming in his stead, but obviously he's hurt right now. So he's missed the last, 2.5 games. I'm not trying to sound rude. I just don't really see any where they've upgraded on defense outside of Von Miller. So, if I'm missing someone, please let me know. I don't see that. So, but we'll see. I mean, at this point, I think there's a lot of upsetness, obviously, if that's even a word, rightfully so. Can't beat the damn Niners, man. It sucks too, because it's like a division rival that we can't stand. And we want it bad. So let me ask you this, those of you that are being active in the chat, before we wrap up this Rams talk. Do you want to see the Niners in the playoffs, or would you rather take the road where we don't have to play them? And we wouldn't play them, I believe, until it wouldn't be, I think, until the NFC, because they're a 6 seed. And I doubt Philly's beating the Tampa Bay. I wouldn't think we'd see them unless we both happen to meet up in the NFC Championship game, which would be some upsets, obviously. But yeah, are we rooting to have to play them again and finally prove it and beat them salt, or no? That's an interesting question. So, hey, Julio, no way we can't beat them. Yeah, I think at the same time, let's just play someone else. Let's just go through someone else, and who cares if we win the Super Bowl? Who cares if we didn't beat the Niners this year? Who gives a rip? All right, last thing here, Renee, and then we'll wrap up that conversation, just because I've already gone longer than I always say. Brockers wasn't anything special. Good against the run, poor at rushing, which is where they've been struggling, is against the run, specifically against the Niners. So Brockers, I think, held his own in that regard. A'Shawn, virtually the same player, good against the run, no rush. I mean, you could argue that, but imagine them being together in rotation instead of, I mean, A'Shawn's not, I think, an every down player. We had to rotate it out. And Gaines much better against both run and rush. Yeah. Well, Gaines plays Sebastian Joseph Day's spot, so that's just a different position on the defensive line. Brockers played D tackle, like a 3-tech, like Aaron Donald. Gaines and Sebastian Joseph play the 1-tech. So they would play together side by side anyway. So that's just different. Yeah, and Gaines has played great. He's been such a fun surprise seeing how he's developed and played well. And that's, hats off to Eric Henderson, Coach Henny, who's really progressed on the defensive line, who I love and I think is going to be a D coordinator in this league probably this year. We may see him gone because of how well he's developed some of those guys. Okay, last little thing here. See the Niners in the playoffs. I'm all for to beat the best. You got to be the best. So yeah, I like to see the Niners. But I also give us very little chance pulling upset against them. Yeah, that's kind of the sentiment, right? Like, we want to beat them. End it in this dismal display against them. But is that mental or that mentality worth it if we can avoid them and just, who cares? Go win the Super Bowl and, like, sure, if Niners want to have that conversation, whatever. We'll show you our Super Bowl rings. So, we'll see. Ben, as a fan, know it feels like mental now, especially McVay. Shanahan is definitely in his head. It would be nice, though. Yeah, it'd be great to beat him. But I think, we'll see. Like I said, it's not likely. And they play the Cowboys. We play the Cardinals. They're the 6th seed, so most likely they would see the Packers in the second round. I highly doubt Philly's beating Tampa Bay, so the Packers will play the lowest seed there. So we'll see. We'll see. But I think that's going to do it for Rams talk. Tough loss, but hey, we're in the playoffs. Hopefully that gave some conversation, gave some into kind of what the coaching looks like, some issues that hopefully they can alleviate and fix, and hopefully things that we can see changed going in and moving forward as we play Arizona this week, which we'll break down all week, have some good guests on and stuff like that. But I think now let's shift gears to this Chargers team, who also let down, defensive letdown, offensive skill players not making correct plays. So I'm going to get on here right now. My buddy, Mr. Dan Wolkenstein, he is the host of Chargers Unleashed, to help me really vent. And Renee, yeah, thank you so much. Great talk. Really appreciate it. I love being able to go back and forth with you guys. And so appreciate you for tuning in. Stick around for the Chargers talk if you want. Maybe you'll learn something about Staley, because we talk a lot about Brandon Staley right now with my man, Dan. Chargers fans, it's a somber day in Los Angeles. It's a day to look back. Obviously, we'll try to look back at a lot of the positives, but we got to get into this thrilling Sunday night game in Vegas. To help me do it, Dan Wolkenstein, host of the Chargers Unleashed podcast, part of our LAFB network, on the show regular, one of my really good friends, and we're just going to vent. This is just an open session of healing, of venting. We're going to get into some of the numbers, the stats, and hopefully give some positives to you Chargers fans, because I know there's a lot of negativity out there in general. So we'll try to talk some people off the ledge. But Dan, thanks for joining the show as usual. What's going on, man? How you doing?
You are welcome. Thank you for having me. I mean, look, it's a rough day. It's a painful time for Chargers fans. Painful time for me. This one hurts. This one stings. The Chargers, everything that could go wrong or go against them did for the better part of 3 quarters. And then, Justin Herbert's magic can only go so far, but man, was that a magical ride. I think, it's fair to say that Chargers fans are rightly sad and sometimes upset at what happened. But I know I'm the eternal optimist. That one sucked. Like, there's no way around it. But that does not take away how incredible this team is set up. And I'm not quite ready to get all in about how excited and pumped up I am for the next season, but you have to admire what this team fought with all game and fought through all game.
Mm-hmm.
And say what you will about all the, we'll get into it, I'm sure, coaching decisions and play calling and blah, 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 blah. Like, this team fights for each other and for their coach. Like, you cannot say otherwise. You just can't. So I'm proud of them. Proud to be a Chargers fan, but it's a sad day for Chargers world. It really is.
Yeah, it's yeah. I mean, you said everything you needed to say. It was such a up and down game. I mean, that game was literally a perfect synopsis of this Chargers season. Just the roller coaster that it has been, the lows of lows and the highs of highs, all in a 60-minute game as the last game of the NFL season, and really put on display kind of what this Chargers season in its entirety has been.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we can get all into that and maybe the what and the why and the how, but, you know, we have to just sit here and look at what this game was. And then maybe we can take a look back at the season and then maybe look to the future. We won't do a crazy long Chargers talk right now, but we can at least look a little bit forward and what to look forward to. But, you know, looking at this game, and let's just start, we're not going to recap the whole game. Everyone saw it. Everyone knows what happened, but what do you think was why did this team seem to come out flat in the beginning when knowing what was on the line, knowing, you know, having the defense, the healthy it's been pretty much all year, the offense, you know, pretty much healthy as well. We're still missing, you know, Brian Bulaga, but he hasn't played a single down all season, so that's no surprise. Everyone else pretty much in there that we needed. Dropped to a 10-0 deficit, obviously come roaring back. All of us that watch the Chargers often know that they were never out of this, are never out of this. That's the difference of this 21 team. But what do you think was the reasoning for just coming out so flat? And let's just give credit to the Raiders too, though. I mean, they're a team fighting for their playoff lives. They're a good team. They're well coached. I know everyone's, and sorry, I asked a question, then I'm going to just keep talking, but I talked to JT the Brick previewing this show, who's a radio guy out in Vegas, and the national narrative and probably the narrative among even Los Angeles Chargers fans is, well, here's a team that, you know, lost John Gruden. They're having an interim coach, but this is an extremely veteran coaching staff. So say what you think about Bradley, about, you know, their offensive coordinator, about Rick Bisaccia, but this is a veteran group that obviously had their guys ready. So let's give them some credit. But why did the Chargers come out flat?
You know, it's a good question, but I also don't know if it's necessarily aimed correctly, because would you say Andre Roberts came out flat? Like he made a mistake. He muffed a punt, and that cost him. I mean, and again, he was trying to extend a play. He didn't muff it, but he was extending a play, and then he fumbled.
Yeah.
And that turned from what was a 6-play drive and a punt to them going up, instead of being 3-0 with us having the ball, it's now them having the ball 3-0, making it 10-0. I don't know if that was us being flat. You know, then after that, Chargers go back at a touchdown to 10-7. 10-7 or 10-3? Yeah, 10-7. But I will say, it did look like the Chargers were a bit, I don't know if skittish is the right word, but they did look a little, I don't know, nervous. And I mean, for good reason. It's a young team. You don't like to see it, but I do think that they settled in. And unfortunately, there just was so many things that went against them all game long. Some of it deservedly so, some of it self-inflicted, some of it questionable at best. But yeah, I mean, I think the start was, they threw the first punches. We made some critical mistakes. We tried to overcome as much as we could. But then that kind of set the stage for we were kind of on our heels all game long.
Yeah. Yeah, and and like you said, though, then we threw punches back and jumped to a 14-10 lead, and all seemed kind of right. Like, okay, here we go. Now we're playing the Chargers brand of football that we know. They got some, let's be honest, some lucky breaks with some referee calls. You never want to say decide a game, because I don't think they did. There still was 60 minutes or 70 minutes in this one with the overtime. But when you call a blatant, I didn't hear us, even Raider fans were like, damn, we got gifted one there, and that defensive
Chris
pass
Harris
interference.
Call.
Yeah, that Chris Harris call, which was, clearly not even a close to a catchable ball. You have Tony Dungy coming out and talking against it. Charger or Raiders radio people coming out against it. So clearly not a right call, but it's about how you bounce back and come back from that. And they were able to, which we'll get into, obviously tie the game up and then have an opportunity to win the game. But it was just kind of it's kind of been this way this whole season with this Chargers team, and I see all the time the national talk, and I've been asked even by Chargers fan or even non-Chargers fans, like, man, this team has so much talent to not be in the playoffs. Like, why is that? What is the reasoning? And what I think, and then I want to get your thoughts, is kind of a few factors. A, consistency is the biggest factor, and we see that with a young coaching staff and a young team. And when you aren't having a consistent product every single week, you're going to have those down games, which the Chargers had quite a few of them, unfortunately. I mean, lost 8. I would say of those 8 losses, probably 4 were decently competitive games. The other 4 were just bad games by the Chargers overall, top to bottom. And so you don't have that consistency. You're not going to be an elite team. You have the elite talent, the elite potential, but the consistency is what makes the teams elite and the ones that win the Super Bowl. They didn't have that this year. I think they will have that as they grow together as a unit, as a coaching staff, as they keep building pieces around Justin Herbert, as Justin Herbert himself becomes more consistent, because even he had some inconsistencies. So that's, I think, 1. 2, it was like and call this whatever you want. Some people will blame coaching. Some people will blame execution. Some people will just blame sheer bad luck. But it seemed like so often this season, and particularly in this game, when there were big moments where you had to have it, which they did some down the stretch, but it was just like they shot themselves in the foot with critical mistakes. And that happens so much throughout this year. And a lot of teams don't have those instances. So sometimes it's just bad luck, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot to unpack there. So one, I think what led to the ultimate demise, I think to your point, it is consistency, but I think it's also just sometimes a lack of execution. And I think that kind of ties with consistency, but also I think it kind of goes more towards like just the overall poise of your team. And I think that is one of the factors that come from a rookie coaching staff with a brand new team that has no pieces that he brought in on his own, really, other than a few free agents and the 1 draft pick. They just weren't able to stay consistent and execute when it mattered most. You mentioned like the boneheaded penalties, Kenneth Murray, that pass interference. Like, did you even see the wide or I think it was a fullback or wide or running back? Like, did you even see him in front of you when you like bulldozed him? Like, I don't know what you're doing. There's a couple bad calls or bad plays as well. And as much, I mean, the thing is, like, there's a little bit of everything to go around. Like, at the end of the day, like, it seems like what could have gone wrong went wrong for the Chargers. Whether it was bad calls, whether it was a couple questionable play calls, whether it was bad officiating, whether it was drops, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. Missed field goals, fumbled punts. I mean, there's really like they had as much headwind as I've ever seen in the Chargers game. And like, if I'm just being real, the fact that they even got that to overtime, like, is a damn miracle. Like, for folks who, and I know there are folks, I'm not gonna mention names, I know there are folks who literally turned it off and stopped watching after they were down 2 scores. It like, do yourself like it, go back and watch that again. I know this hurts right now, but for all of the things I think that caused this loss, the main things, there are 2 kind of, there's 1 positive, 1 negative. I'm gonna go here. The one thing that can kind of salvage this feeling for Chargers fans is just go look at how freaking amazing your quarterback is at the end of that game, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think the ultimate demise of this team was lack of execution. And like, no play was more like personified than that, like 3rd and 23.
I was literally just going to bring that up.
Like, and Chargers fans who have been around a while, like, know all too well about those types of plays that seemingly always get converted. You remember like the Ray Diddle stuff. You remember, I mean, there's so it's just it's insane. And I literally on that play, I was telling my wife, we were watching, I said, just don't do anything stupid, no penalties, no, like just 10 yards. Like, I don't care. Give him whatever. And for that to happen, and I don't know if you saw this, Ryan, but the yellow line on the live broadcast,
yeah, it was wrong.
And I think that's why everyone was like, "There's no way that's first down." I thought it was fourth down.
Yeah,
but then it turns out it was first.
Yeah, it was like a yard and a half ahead.
I want that play, like, just completely, like, that's why you lose. Like, that's why you lost. And that kind of stuff happened in those critical situations where there's no way you can give up blank.
Yeah.
You did.
I was going to bring that play up, so I'm glad you did. I want to get into it just a little bit, unpack it a little bit to give some actual, like, film study realistically, because everyone can sit here and we can boo-hoo and talk about Chargers being the Chargers and, oh, you just can't give that up, which, yeah. But let's get into a little bit what actually happened. So it's a 3rd and 23. Chargers are playing a very, very soft, deep, whatever it was, cover 2, cover 3 with, they had, I think, 3 guys on that, basically on the first down marker, just to not give up a big play. So the defensive set was perfectly matched for a draw play. So credit to the Raiders for calling a great play, because that's what the draw exposes. Now, that being said, you still should have the athletes and the playmakers to be able to bear down on the running back and stop him 15 yards. Like a draw with that kind of depth, you're going to give up 15 chunk play, but not 23. What in your eyes was it just so perfectly executed by the Raiders, or was it so poorly executed by the Chargers? Because how do you give that up?
I think there's always truth on both sides, to be honest. Derwin James got wiped out from the center, I believe, on that play.
Yeah, Andre James had a great block on Derwin.
And then
James on James crime.
Yep. And then I think, honestly, and you mentioned it, like, those plays, you're bound to give up chunks, but not like the whole chunk.
Yeah.
Look at where he was initially contacted and look at where he ended up falling, like landing. I want to say that's like 5, 6, 7 yards. And so for them not to be able to wrap that up and stop it, like, that's a bad look, man. Like,
and that's where the execution comes in, because I want people to understand this listening. If you watch any team, any game, any team, so let's turn the switch off for the Chargers and blaming that right now. When it's a 3rd and long situation, every defense plays this. You see so many times where it can be 3rd and 25 and the offense picks up 20 yards or 18.
No one's 17. Running cover 0 blitzes. Like,
yeah, exactly. You're basically saying, we're going to give you 5 yards to the stick or 3 yards to the stick, because as long as we stop you, you're punting. Unless you're playing Brandon Staley, then probably not punting. But that's what every defense does. So it wasn't schematically bad. So I don't want anyone to freak out. It was just the pure execution of, okay, you're going to give up a chunk play. Just make sure to stop them before 23 yards. You have 23 yards to make up ground and make a stop. And they weren't able to do it. So that goes into what you're saying earlier. It was just execution. And one of those things that the Raiders executed, at least for the first 55 minutes, the Raiders executed better. The Chargers executed better the final 5 minutes. And then the Raiders executed better in overtime. It's just, that's what, to me, it really comes down to.
So, the crazy part is, I honestly don't even think the Chargers out-executed the Raiders at the end of the game. Like, I just think they had more opportunities to execute.
Yeah.
Like the Raiders, and this is, I think, what probably pains most Chargers fans. And where I think I tweeted this like halfway through the first half. If the Chargers force Derek Carr to beat them, the Chargers are going to win that game. But if the Chargers shoot themselves in the foot and give up crazy chunk plays, whether it's defensive pass interferences or easy holding calls or stupid penalties like that, then you're going to give Derek Carr a very easy chance to win. And arguably, the way the Raiders, the path for their success in this game was to make this an absolute trash can of a game. Yeah. And just muddy the water all game for 4 quarters. And for 3.5 quarters, they did.
Yeah. That's been their formula all of December.
And still, and I think this is kind of, glass half full me for a sec. And still, the Chargers needed all of those things, which we haven't talked about all of them yet, but all of the things that went wrong, even with all of those things, it took 69 minutes and 58 seconds to beat this team. And so I know there's no silver lining. I know there's no moral victories, but we're set up. Okay. The one part I was going to ask you, speaking of execution, and I don't know if it's going to tie into maybe Justin Herbert a little bit, but you saw some things you saw from Justin Herbert were just not normal, like in the best of ways. Like this kid is absolutely unreal. But then you flip it. You talked about how the Raiders were out executed for 3.5 quarters and the Chargers maybe did in the end. I disagree. I think the Chargers still didn't execute, but they just had more chances because Justin Herbert was on the field for 4 downs versus 3 and was able to just will this team in spite of everything it tried doing to lose, in spite of drops, in spite of penalties, in spite of missed assignments, in spite of timeouts, in spite of play calling, in spite of everything. Like he still just put them on his back and found a way. And I have never, ever in my life seen a 19 play drive with like 5 or 6 fourth down conversions in under 2 minutes, no timeouts. Like what that was, I don't know if I will ever see that again. Like that was that crazy. But like how, I guess the question for you then is like, how can so many people seemingly I don't want to say shrink at the biggest moments, but like not finish a play when you have someone playing that well? Like how many times did you see a guy drop a dime that only he could catch it in that fourth quarter overtime? I mean, it was beyond insane to me. I couldn't believe what was happening. I'm like, this is a Hall of Fame quarterback play right now. Yeah. And like, why? Why say you?
I mean, that's the $1 million question. And Herbert's teammates, and this is, love all the Chargers guys, and this is not a dig. Well, I guess it is kind of a dig. Let's just talk real. I mean, his teammates didn't do him any favors for the most part. Overall, his teammates let him down because you have a quarterback, and this is going to get talked ad nauseum probably all offseason, but it's just the facts, who put up one of the greatest performances that I have ever witnessed. I know the stats will, he's under 60% completion percentage, went 34 of 64. Most attempts he's ever had in his career at 64 when you're playing behind and you have 19 plays in one drive, all passes. That's going to happen. I know, 384 yards is great, but he's had better performances than that. I know he had the one interception. But what he did in those final games when it was consistently like could have just packed it in, right? Like everything kept going against him. A drop, a penalty, getting just absolutely worked by the defensive line. Max Crosby, who had a field day against Storm Norton, which in my opinion isn't even Storm Norton's fault. Everyone knows who's the better player. Like, I don't know what you can do to better equip that. One thing I'll say about that, because I don't want to get into it too much, we're talking about Herbert, but everyone's like, we got to give more help to Storm Norton. Got to give more help to Storm Norton, whether it's a chip or more inside help or whatnot, blah, 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 blah. I mean, yeah, that's on the surface. And just like when you're sitting there on the couch saying that's obviously what you want to happen. But the Raiders were getting incredible pressure from the inside. So what, you're going to take one of those guys, give help on Crosby, and then leave their interior guys who were absolutely, I mean, the interior guys in the beginning of the game were playing better than Crosby. I mean, you had, I'm trying to remember the guys' names right now. I feel bad because I don't cover the Raiders, but Darius Philon, former Charger, had a fantastic game before he got injured. Number 77, Quentin Jefferson from the inside had a fantastic game. So it's not like you can just pull over Schofield and be like, all right, we're doubling Crosby, because the interior guys were getting pressure. So it was just the perfect storm. And the fact that Justin Herbert was able to overcome all that and overcome the drops in critical moments. I mean, some of those drops from Mike Williams, who we're going to get into later here, and we're already at 20 minutes, but hey, this is
Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Jared Cook, like everyone seemingly dropped it.
It's unreal. And I think we'll get into the offseason, but that's going to be one thing that they take a real hard look at is this unit as a whole right now and who they go after. Maybe you don't look at their route running ability, their speed. You look at who's a guy that doesn't drop the damn football, because that may be a big thing. But anyway, the fact that Herbert dealt with all that and still willed his team down to not only score 2 scores, but score a 2-point conversion, because you needed 15, remember, with 6 fourth down conversions. It's the greatest performance I've ever seen from a quarterback. The greatest performance I've ever seen the greatest game regular season game I've watched. And kudos to the NFL that this was the last game they had on the calendar.
They made
with
a lot of
all
money.
eyes watching. People can talk crap on the NFL all they want. It is still the best product in entertainment, period.
That was the gutsiest quarterback play performance I have ever seen. And considering all that was at stake, and I know we could talk about like some of the greatest quarterback performances of all time, but in terms of gutsiest and one that just willed his team by himself, I think there is no question he is clearly the best player on the field. Like, it's not even close.
Oh, yeah.
And if there are Raiders fans who are listening to this and watching, like, kudos to your defense. Like, legit, you guys did far better than I think anyone expected, and honestly, probably than you expected. And your front four dominated that game and is what caused a lot of this.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the previous
fantastic.
Shout out to all the previous Chargers who you guys are now successful with. I still like our quarterback, but that's besides the point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the other thing, Dan, real quick, I'll say about him is that bodes so well for the future. And everyone has their different leadership qualities, different leadership style, different in-game style. But so many times we see now with the beauty of replay and how we have 12 different camera angles in all these games. Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, for sure, Tom Brady. When their players aren't helping them out, for instance, receivers dropping passes, how often do we see those quarterbacks like motioning things, anger in their face, like yelling? And that obviously those guys have won. So I'm not saying that's a discredit to them. Herbert never once batted an eye. Like, cool, calm. Okay, get back in the huddle. Let's do it again. Let's run it again.
Because he's like, you know, you messed up. I know it. Like,
I don't even. Yeah, that to me, I kept watching that over and over and kept thinking of what a guy like Tom Brady would be doing, throwing a tantrum that his receivers were dropping, throwing a tantrum that he kept getting blitzed on the right side. Justin Herbert, just cool, calm. Let's get the next play.
And I think that's the part that hurts as a Chargers fan or covering the team, is that you see a performance, you see a guy like that in Justin Herbert, where how can a team lose when you have a performance like that?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like, there were not two Justin Herberts. There was just one on the Chargers. Or else, if there were two, we probably would have won that game because Justin Herbert would have also caught it most of the time.
Yeah.
But, like, it was tough. And I think, look, this is Overreaction Monday, especially on a Black Monday.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of things going on, and you hear all kinds of crazy talk on social media about coaching, general manager, players, you name it.
Yep.
Let's just get real for a hot sec, okay? In this game, and we can even extrapolate it out to the whole season, Brandon Staley was very good and is the only reason why the Chargers are even in a position to be able to, along with Justin Herbert, to be able to be in this playoff format. He has changed the identity, has changed the culture, has changed the mindset, has changed the aggressiveness, and has changed the creativity of this team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's all true. Now, do great coaches sometimes do questionable things? Sure. For example, that 4th down and go for it when on their own 18, I believe. Personally, I would not have done it. But do I understand the call? Absolutely. Because think about it, you don't really think that their offense is going to beat you, which like plot twist, they didn't. They got an easy 3 points, but that was it, which didn't matter in the end because you could go right back and score a touchdown. You were still down just 6 with the field goal.
The Raiders offense, for those that don't know, are ranked 29th in red zone scoring. So obviously coaches do their research and know that. Go ahead.
So revisionist history is a hell of a drug, especially when the Chargers, I think they went 6 for 7 on 4th downs, but the only one they didn't get is the one that people are bitching about. Yeah. Look, I get you can question it, but you also have to understand the rationale. Mm-hmm. Now, getting real again, at the end of the game, so for the millionth time, and I hope people can actually go back and watch, end of the game, end of overtime, there's about 40 seconds, whatever it is, 48 seconds left, about 2 seconds left on the play clock. Brandon Staley calls a timeout.
No, we're going to get into TimeOutGate.
So
you want to say
so in short, people can question that.
Yeah.
Why'd you call a timeout? But you also have to understand the rationale. When someone tells you why, then you can't just be like, well, that's not right. Mm-hmm. Because if you actually pay attention to it. Like, it actually didn't matter.
Yeah.
And last but not least, and I honestly think that the Raiders fans and Chargers fans would agree on this. And if they wouldn't, like, I'm really curious. But I think everyone can agree that the Chargers are a more talented team than the Raiders. And I personally believe that the better, more talented team lost. But it seemed as though the more, I don't want to say resilient, but more opportunistic team won. They took advantage of the opportunities when they were presented, when they expressed themselves, like Brandon Staley likes to say. And they took advantage. Like, the ball went their way, and the more opportunistic team won. It's tough. Like, these are one of those games where, like, there isn't just one thing where you can say, oh, if they just did this. And it was one of those games where any one of 10 things that happened, if it went the other way, if Nazir Adderley's fumble that was forced goes in the end zone versus at the 1 yard line, there's 7 points. Like, there's so many of those where it's hard. But I think what's going to be interesting before we get into the whole TimeOutGate is, like, getting into, like, the roster and getting into, like, how this team lost that game. There's a lot of playmakers on this Chargers team. And to be fair, there are playmakers on the Raiders too. And if you were to give, like, a percentage fault, if you will,
the blame pie,
how many slices of the blame pie are you giving percentage wise to the coaching staff / roster management, Telesco GM side?
Yeah.
And how much of that are you giving to, like, you guys were in the position and you just didn't do it? So coaching / roster or execution, how much percentage are you giving to each?
It's a great question. If I'm being honest, I think coaching and roster construction need to be separated. Although I do understand that Staley had, some say in this roster construction, albeit his very first offseason. So how much?
We could say 3 slices if you want to split into 3.
We might. I'm going to do 3 slices though, because I think, and that leads us to our next point that I wanted to get into, which is this Chargers defensive kind of rotation and kind of some of the letdown this defense had. So I would look at roster construction probably at about 15 to 18% to blame, because you just have maybe some depth issues perhaps. And this is, again, you can't fix this in the first offseason of a first head coach, but I think they just have some players that don't necessarily fit in this system.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah, exactly. So that I mean, you can put that solely on Tom Telesco's shoulders. I think it's more of just needing more time, but that is a factor, a reason. So I'll go 18%. Pure coaching. So based on where these players are today, based on how they've been coached, based on coaching decisions in the game, I'll put 8%, because some of the defensive rotations are the only thing really I have a problem with, which I'll pose to you here in a second. And so that leaves me, I'm terrible at math, but 18 plus 8.
76%.
Okay, 76% on execution.
Sorry, 74%.
74% on execution, because you're at week 18, 17th game of the season. Your roster on the field is pretty much healthy. You have stars at every level of the field. You just need to execute. Play calling on offense, I thought, was really good overall. I thought Joe Lombardi called a good game.
Other than the 3rd and 2 and 4th and 2 run up the middles.
I was going to say, outside of that, 4th down, 4th and 1 run from Austin Eckler. But sometimes I think coaches overthink. And I'm sure the thought process was they know Herbert's going to throw it because he's the best player on the field. Let's try to surprise them with an Eckler draw play or an Eckler dive up the middle. Obviously, they were not fooled at all. Outside of that, I thought he called a good game. Defensively, I thought Staley called a fairly good game. It was just players didn't execute. Now, the problem I had with coaching, which is what we'll get into now, is some of the defensive players that he put out there, particularly Kenneth Murray. I know if you're on Twitter, it was ad nauseum. I almost had to mute Kenneth Murray. I was so sick of hearing about everyone complaining about Murray out there, but to a reason, he played poorly. It was graded at like 29 by PFF for yesterday. 28.9, lowest on the team, was his PFF grade. Continually making mistakes, continually in the wrong place at the wrong time, missed tackles, over pursue. I think that's his biggest issue is over pursuing. The guy is so athletic that he just mentally doesn't seem to know where to be and just relies on athleticism. And it worked at Oklahoma in the Big 12. Doesn't work in the NFL. That's a whole different issue we can get into. So that to me is why my biggest issue. Him and Kaiser White. Kaiser White had, I have it here in front of me. Kaiser White had 57 snaps. Drew Tranquil had 29 snaps, and Kenneth Murray had 44 snaps. So almost double Drew Tranquil's snap count. That was my biggest issue with coaching with Brandon Staley. And now part of that is the defensive coordinator. Ronaldo Hill is in charge of player substitutions. Staley's calling the game. Ronaldo Hill is the guy putting the guys out there. However, Staley's the defensive head coach. He has overriding power to say, all right, this isn't working. Let's get Tranquil and Kaiser White out there. So that to me was my biggest issue. And he said after the game, because he was asked, he said, Kenneth Murray's our best coverage backer. I don't know if we've necessarily seen that to be the case all year long. He's not going to be a guy that's going to go out and throw players on the bus. So a lot of that's coaches speak. I mean, what do they expect him to say? Yeah, Kenneth played terrible. That was a poor decision. Like he's not going to say that. So there's people speculating on Twitter that it's coming from the top of the organization, Spanos and Tom Telesco. I don't believe that for 1 second. They know how good Brandon Staley is at football, how good of a mind he has. They're giving him full control. They're not saying, you got to play this guy because we drafted him and traded up.
Like, imagine that conversation. Like, and people want to talk about conspiracy theory. Like, okay, you think that Dean Spanos and or Tom Telesco is going to go into the coach's office and be like, hey, Brandon, I know we just brought you in here. I know we kind of gave you the keys to everything, but that guy that we drafted last year, like, before we really don't want to look like an idiot. So you're going to have to just play him regardless. Like, do you really think that little of Brandon Staley to where he's going to be like, okay.
Yeah. And I get people are saying that in a sense to defend Staley because there's not a lot of defense of why he was playing.
But he would not do, there's no way he would say, okay, he wouldn't have taken the job.
Yeah, exactly. He needed full autonomy and he got full autonomy.
But like, okay, let me push back real quick on a second. You mentioned the defense, which, and again, like this is the part that's hard to stomach. Like the Raiders didn't do much that game. I think Josh Jacobs had like 60 something yards rushing through 4 quarters.
Oh yeah. They did great until overtime when they gave up 67 yards rushing.
Until overtime. But like, look at these stats are in almost 5 quarters of football. Like Derek Carr threw for 186 yards and 20 completions. Josh Jacobs outside of the overtime one, but we'll just give it to him. 132 yards rushing. That was the story. But again, half of that came in overtime.
Yeah, here's the big stat, Dan, before you continue. Through 4 quarters, Josh Jacobs averaged 3.3 yards per carry. In overtime, 9.17 yards per carry.
There's your ball game. So like through 4 quarters, like as much as we want to complain about the Chargers defense, like the Chargers defense, if you look at it like 30,000 foot view, they're not the ones that like muffed the field goal or muffed the punt. They're not the ones that missed the field goal that gave up great field position. Like that's not on them.
Yeah.
And those landed into, I think those became field goals, like, or one of them did. So even that, like even in a quote unquote bad defensive performance, like it wasn't even bad. I would argue other than the Josh Jacobs runs in overtime, which again, like people are probably just dead tired or whatever, but like every one of the other stats is probably going to make the Chargers defense better than the previous week.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we can certainly, when you look at the overtime, that's where you can align blame on the defense because, letting them drive down both times. But it's okay. Let me ask you this before we get to TimeOutGate because I want to look to the future at the very end of this, but it aligns well with this conversation. So based on what the defense has been this year, which overall it's a mixed bag, right? I think there's been some good performances, some bad. Statistically, they look bad, but I think situationally they've played well in specific weeks, specific competition, specific avenues. But overall, as a unit, they have not been great, I would say. What in the offseason, and again, we're going to talk quickly free agency and draft at the end, but do you think is the reason or what they need to address? Is it the secondary? Is it the defensive line? Is it the linebacking core? And what would have, assisted them yesterday in not giving up 69 yards rushing in the overtime period?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be making a lot more money working for the Chargers. But I think, I mean, I'd like to think I know a little bit. If first thought, in my opinion, I think if you look at this Chargers team and what they do really well, I think they have speed on defense, and I think that they are versatile on defense.
Mm-hmm.
They have some really, really good playmakers on defense. But the one thing that I don't think that they can kind of hang their hat on is like the physicality of the front seven. Like like their linebackers, for example. Look at Kaiser White, Kenneth Murray, Drew Tranquil. You could throw in Kyler Fackrell in there if you want. Amon in there if you want.
Mm-hmm. Neiman,
like those aren't physically imposing guys. And then going up the front level to the front four, outside of Joey Bosa and Justin Jones, you don't have guys that are going to like anchor down. I mean, Linval Joseph was admirable,
mm-hmm.
but like the guy's 31, 32, and he's also like not going to be able to play every down. And when you're getting gashed up front, which I think Jake, our co-host, has always said, like interior defensive line has been one of the biggest weaknesses all season.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think the issue is the front, whether it's like middle linebacker / like interior defensive tackle, like nose tackle, and or depth in the secondary, not top end, depth.
Mm-hmm.
I've said it before. I'll take our A squad against almost anyone, but if our A squad's not out there and our B squad or C squad's out there, like pray for us.
Yeah.
So if it's me going into the draft, I'm probably hoping to get. I want to get some bodies that can impose themselves on others. I don't want someone that can race around. I want someone that can like out muscle and make the tackle or make the sack or make the tackle for loss.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can look at Staley's just his scheme and tenure and what made his defenses so successful in the past. And when you have a guy like Aaron Donald in Los Angeles Rams, you have a guy, I know he doesn't get talked about publicly a lot, but Shelby Harris or Draymond Jones in Denver. Those are two exceptional defensive tackles. You look at what they had with Akeem Hicks in Chicago. Like the Chargers don't necessarily have it. Justin Jones, I think, is real damn close in at least in the run defense.
He had Khalil Mack in Chicago, right?
Khalil, yeah, but I'm not talking about edge. I'm talking about those.
No, I'm saying in general. He had like those dudes who were just like physically.
Yeah, which he has in Joey Bosa. The Joey Bosa would be the Khalil Mack, the Von Miller, the Leonard Floyd of the Rams. But he doesn't have that Aaron Donald, doesn't have that Draymond Jones, Shelby Harris, doesn't have that Akeem Hicks, that interior imposing guy that, well, you can't go in the middle or the outside because they have Joey Bosa on the outside and they got this dude in the middle. And Justin Jones is great. He's so important. I've said many times, I think he's the most important player in this defense, not named Derwin James. That's how much he means. But you need someone else and someone that's available a lot because Justin Jones misses a lot of time. That's kind of been his MO, period, his whole career here, unfortunately. So you need another body. So I agree that defensive line, which we're going to get into here in just a second. But I want to shift real quick to TimeOutGate. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I think this is just the most bogus conversation. I think the fact that on the broadcast, Collinsworth and Al Michaels kind of brought it up. That's kind of what sparked this Twitter debate. You have half media people, like legit media people that are calling out against it. And then other media people saying like, what are you talking about? This is like the most common sense. Like, why are we even talking about this? This is, which I'm on that side, obviously, but the fact that it's kind of split is why it's turned into this tornado of discussion that unfortunately is going to cloud the offseason. Hopefully we can get past it within this week and move on because it's stupid. But we got to at least bring it up. TimeOutGate. So with 38 seconds left in the game, Brandon Staley calls a timeout. I don't want to get into all of what happened because everyone knows they watched the game. But the thought is, man, if he didn't call that timeout, Vegas already said they're just going to run the ball. They're going to go for the tie. Because he did that, they go for the win. They get the win. And so that's the big debate.
And just real quick, he called the timeout when they had, I think, like 2 seconds left on the play clock.
Yes. So what actually happened when people actually want to maybe not just blame the head coach and say this is why they lost. The Vegas Raiders were in shotgun formation. It was 3rd and 4. They were at the point where they were at a very long field goal try, but Daniel Carlson was one of the best in business, so they still would have attempted a field goal, but obviously they're going to try to get more yardage to make the easier field goal. 3rd and 4, shotgun formation. The play clock is down to 2 or 4 seconds, so it's less than 4 seconds. The game clock is at 38 seconds. For those that don't know, 35 seconds is the play clock. So they had, or 40 seconds, excuse me, the play clock. They had to run a play or they would have got a delay game. They were not in kneel down formation. Those that somehow have thought that or have seen that, as they were in shotgun formation. No team is running a kneel down play from shotgun. If the Raiders were, then touche Rick Bisaccia, they won this chess match. Then touche them. That's not happening there.
No way.
The Chargers were in a different defensive set that was not what Brandon Staley wanted to defend that 3rd and 4 play. So that's where the timeout was called. I believe also there was a receiver on the outside that was uncovered, wide open, if I'm not mistaken. So the timeout was called because Staley wanted to get the correct unit in that he thought gave his guys the best chance to stop that 3rd and 4th play. And as he said in his press conference, force the longest field goal possible for the Raiders. Like, they knew the Raiders were going to kick a field goal. If they missed it, great. They tie, they both go on. If they make it, there's the end of the season.
And real quick on that, with that decision, everyone talks about the whole Kenneth Murray and everybody being upset. In that timeout, Kenneth Murray comes off. Yeah. Kaiser White comes on.
Yeah. Your better run defender. So they make a change there.
They do what you want.
Yeah, they're putting the better player in for that situation. They're giving his guys a rest also because they've just been gashed for quite a few yards, hadn't been able to stop the run at all in that drive. Get the guys in. Next play, Raiders won. They get like an 18-yard gain or something, like just a huge gain, and then kick the field goal and win the game.
Cut back left.
So, yeah, huge run. They're clearly not running the clock out. The guy could have gone down and he ends up, breaking 2 tackles and getting more. So they're in it to win it. Then after the game, interviewed by was it Pam Oliver who did the game? I can't remember. Lisa Salters, one of those two.
I think it was Pam Oliver.
Pam Oliver. Interviewed. Staley takes the timeout. Does that change your guys' mindset? Derek Carr says, yeah, obviously it changed our mindset. All of a sudden, everyone, that's what they take. Stop. What he continued to say was, we were always in this game to win the game. We were never going for a tie. He could have meant changed our mindset as in 3rd and 4, we were going to do a pass play, and now we're doing a run play. Like, changing the play calling, like the people that are reading into that. And then there's the quote afterwards, Usc and Ucla in the game. And I want to get into that too. And sorry,
there's so many of them that you can misconstrue. And you're like,
he talked about, you said something to the likes of, yeah, I talked long snapper, the Raiders. They went to high school together or whatever, college together back in Eaton, Colorado. And long snapper says, like, yeah, we had contemplated tying. The long snapper, for those that don't know, isn't on offense, isn't in the play calling room on that 3rd and 4. I'm sure on the sidelines in overtime, they had said, well, if it comes down to it, kind of like what we talked all week, like, yeah, maybe we'll go for the tie.
Everyone talked about every scenario, obviously.
Yeah. So all this being said, and then I'll get your take on it. I have zero problem with the timeout. The timeout was not in any factor, way, shape, or form the reason why the Raiders decided to run a play. They were not going to nail it down on 3rd and 4. They were not. At any point, they were not going to nail it down. You're going to kick it regardless. Even if they're at wherever they were at the time, they're going to attempt a field goal because why would you not? A, you just look stupid. B, you get a chance to knock out your division rival. You're going to the playoffs regardless. You're going to try to win it. Your take.
I think it's one of those situations where people are upset and in their feelings and are looking for a scapegoat, looking for something to blame when they can't find the right reason or can't find a more applicable excuse. You're right. It had no bearing on that game. Regardless, they would have scored the play. And if they didn't call timeout, they would have run a play. Let's say they run a draw with whatever it is, a run play from shotgun formation. Same thing happens. And you're still stuck with either you call timeout and you're at the 30 and then they kick a field goal or not. It did not matter at all. I understand people questioning the 4th down offensive play earlier that game, like on their own 18. I get it. But it is an absolute non-story. And I think that's probably what kind of baffles and frustrates a lot of people is half the people probably didn't really understand the scenario. And the other half people were like, did you not see what just happened? Like, obviously that was because he was either tired, the team was tired, or he wanted to get a better formation. Like, it's not that difficult.
Here's what Braden Fihoko, who plays for the Chargers defensive line, probably knows a thing about formations and here's what he says. Said nobody outsmarted anyone. Went from nickel to penny. Light 6-man box to a heavy 6-man box with 5 DBs. They had 11 personnel, balanced runner pass. Vegas just made a good play. 7 jet motion causes late safety rotation. 24 not going to just follow 87 when you got 13 on the field. Shit happens. Like, that's a pretty good explanation as to Vegas was not nailing the football, which is the big conundrum that everyone is dealing with. Vegas was not.
You got Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, and Josh Jacobs. Safety is not going to let go of, I believe it was let go of 13 Hunter Renfrow so they can just focus on Waller because then 13 is wide open.
Yeah.
So
then you give up a touchdown. Look even worse.
So look, it's unfortunate. But you know what I found like painfully ironic was how many people, Ryan, at the beginning of the day were all up in arms about like, no way are you going to play for a tie. No way are you going to accept that. You play to win. That's not part of the game. Whatever. Fast forward to 38 seconds left in the game.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, oh, we could have tied.
Yeah.
What happened? Like, keep that same energy, folks. Like, there are certain situations when they express themselves, coaches will have to make a decision on what's best for the team.
Yeah.
In that scenario, at the end of the game, 38 seconds left, let's say they run that same draw play or same run play and they get stuffed for 2 yards. They're probably going to kneel it. Or they're probably just going to let the time run out. Or maybe they go out and try to kick a 58-yard field goal or whatever it is.
Yeah.
With 2 seconds left. Like, that's what happened. If I was their coach, that's what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing if it's the Chargers, other way around. Like, if the Chargers had the ball at the opponent's 40-yard line with 2 seconds left, would you rather them attempt to get them out of the playoffs, division rivals, or kneel it? Like, well, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So it was just painfully ironic and just like chef's kiss that it came down to that. I mean, but that's the entire NFL season. Like, it was just bananas. Yeah. And of course it came down to this, but yeah, TimeOutGate is not a controversy. It's nothing. I think it's just a lot of people in their feelings and trying to give hot takes and thrashing, but I get it. Like, we're hurting.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I know. Exactly. So, well, shoot, man, I wanted to get in some off-season priorities, but we got all off-season to do that. I think we've hit all the marks on this episode of seeing what happened, trying to peel back the reasoning for it, talk about our disappointment, vent a little bit. So
can we have an optimistic point or segment here for like just like a minute?
Yes.
You can't have a show without any optimism with me, right?
Yes.
Glass half full. Let's look at the positives for 30 seconds to know that's not why people are here. What would you say were the best things that came out of this season on face value?
I mean, I would say seeing the continued progression of Justin Herbert, definitely no slump. Like, that was a conversation last year. Knowing that you have one of the best in the game. I think the culture that was built with this team, a win-first mentality, sometimes that ended up costing and going the other direction, but the mentality was built. The foundation was built of this is who we are. There's no question of who the Chargers are and what they're aiming to do.
The fact that you get to hear people say that's who the Chargers have been all season, like, you'll take that.
Yeah, exactly. The identity, whether you like it or hate it, they have an identity, which I think is so important for not only a team organization, but for a young coaching staff to establish. So those are 2 huge positives. I think the fact that they relatively stayed healthy. I know there was injuries all throughout the season, up and down, but they had no, devastating season-long injuries overall. So I think that kudos to the coaching staff, because that's been the MO of this team is the devastating injuries. And some of that comes into how you run operations, how you run your practice schedules, what you do in the offseason. And the fact that the Chargers didn't have that, I think, shows a change in the guard too of how they did things, operationally speaking, from the coaching staff standpoint. So those 3 things I think are huge positives, huge pluses. And lastly, you win 9 games. You have a winning season. It sucks right now that they missed the playoffs. Everyone talks about the talent of this team. not being in the playoffs, and I get it, and I agree with it. This team should be in the playoffs. You look at the Steelers. Are you kidding me? This team should absolutely be in the playoffs. But you still, you move 2 games up from last year, so there's improvement there. You have an identity. You have a superstar quarterback, and you know the direction this organization is going. So all of those are huge positives for me for this year.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong with any of them. I guess a couple things I would add to that would probably be, I think the culture of kind of the fan base too, I think has been a huge shift this year. You're starting to see like, oh, there are Chargers fans in DC and Chargers fans in Cincinnati and Chargers fans traveling to Vegas and filling up stadiums now. Like the home games are actually home games now. I think that's a huge positive. I think player development, as much as people want to get on the depth of this team, like look at Nazir Adderley, man. Like Kaiser White, Uchenna Nwosu, Josh Palmer. You look at Donald Parham before his ugly incident. I mean,
Trey
so
Pipkins.
many got Rashawn Slater. I mean, I'm sorry, who'd you say?
Trey Pipkins. I mean,
Pipkins, Storm. I mean, there's so many guys that you are going to give up on.
Yeah.
And then this coaching staff helped kind of turn things around. Do they fix everything? No. But for as much as people want to focus on the negatives, which rightly so, I think if you snap back and you look at it, the Chargers have a winning record. They've got an absolute stud quarterback. They've got a boatload of cap space. They've got 11 draft picks as of right now.
Yeah.
And they've got a hungry team with a new identity and a culture that is pissed off. Like, if you just take out all the emotions for 1 second and just on face value, you have a 9-8 team with a franchise quarterback who's arguably top 3 in the NFL. You've got arguably the most cap space in free agency, 11 draft picks, Joey Bosa, Keenan Allen, Derwin James. Like, you take that. Like, it's exciting to think about, but it just makes it that much more heartbreaking that they could not get into the dance, because I'm telling you, every AFC team on the playoff picture was so glad that the Chargers lost that game. The Chargers beat 4 of the 7 playoff teams this year. This year.
Yeah.
It's just so glass half full. You're welcome.
Yep. I think that's a good way to wrap this conversation up, but we got a lot of stuff all off season. I'm sure you guys will be dropping your episode here soon too. So Dan Wolkenstein at Chargers Homer on Twitter. Chargers Unleashed is the podcast right here on the LA Football Network. Dan, thanks as always, my brother.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in. Ryan, thanks for everything all season. I know this has been a wild ride for not just for the Chargers, but for the Rams, for you, for all of LAFB. It's been kind of crazy, but in the best of ways. This is a bittersweet moment for I think Chargers fans at kind of the end of the season, or at least 2021 season. But yeah, man, thank you just for everything. This has been fun. I can't wait to kind of get an off-season talk, get a draft, prospects, going to the Super Bowl. We have some fun stuff coming up later on. We got people going to Senior Bowls. I mean, all kinds of stuff going on. But in short, thank you for having me on. Thank you for everything you've given to the community here, both for the Chargers and the Rams in LA. And can't wait to keep this thing going.
It's been a wild ride, and the train is just getting rolling. So everyone hop on with us. Appreciate you, brother. Have a good day, okay?
You too, man.
All right. There goes Dan. Whew, this was a longer therapy session, a longer LA football podcast than usual. We're touching an hour 40. So I am so eternally grateful for all you guys that jumped on here with me, tuned in, submitted questions, thoughts, concerns, reactions. Thank you for that. You can find me on here, the LA Football Show, live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5. We're also on 5 o'clock on the radio on AM 1090, the mightier ESPN radio. That was their big announcement today. Radio station just merged with ESPN. So that's kind of cool. So you can catch us there Fridays at 5 as well. LFB Network YouTube, LFBnetwork.com, LA Football Podcast, anywhere you get your podcast. Would appreciate a subscribe, like, rating, anything. So thank you so much. Tough Monday, Black Monday. It's Black Monday for a lot of coaches. Huge changes in the NFL. Man, I was going to get into some UCLA and USC stuff, and I think we've gone too long, so we'll get into that on Monday's show. But I'll at least mention those that don't know. DTR is back for his 5th season, just announced with UCLA. And Jackson Dart, supposed starter for USC, just entered the transfer portal. But that probably means Caleb Williams is coming to Hollywood and joining USC. No confirmation yet, but I can't see Dart entering the portal without something like that happening, knowing that his job is gone because Caleb Williams will probably be the starter for new head coach Lincoln Riley. So we'll get into all of that and what it means on Wednesday. Plus, we'll be looking at this Rams-Cardinals matchup. Jordan Rodriguez of The Athletic is joining me for the Wednesday show to talk about the Rams. Also talk about her piece she wrote on Jalen Ramsey, a phenomenal piece if you haven't read it yet. So we'll be doing that on Wednesday. And yeah, hope you guys have a great week. Thank you so much, like I said, for tuning in. I am Ryan Dyer. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Talk to you on Wednesday. Peace.